Okay, today we're going to talk about strategies for dealing with sort of the old and now and new normal for athletes. So to get a few things out of the way, I mean, the first, kind of highlights there is just, I'd like to kind of squeeze those really quick and really get down to the very bottom one, which is really the important disclaimer. And really, I think what I'd like to say is there's really nothing that I'm going to say or illustrate today that hasn't already been set, in the in the scriptures or great philosophers or scientists or researchers or even my mentors. And so I really claim no originality for what I'm going to be saying here today, basically. I'm citing experts. I'm really not the expert here. And first of all, it's great to see familiar faces again, like Rosalind and Bob. And geez, Christina, you could have plopped me into the schedule into a less challenging slot. I mean, how do you follow Dr. Bob Nideffer, really, right? And I'm making some assumptions about you all today. First of all, I'm assuming you're all very exceptional people in your own walks of life and what you do. And I'm sort of old school, so I don't know, people may want to take some notes here because I'm going to ask you to make some lists during this conversation today, because exceptional people do that. They take notes, they keep journals. I've got a good deal of information on the following slides. We know that people learn either visually or auditorily or kinesthetically, and Bob talked about that just a little while ago, and so did Rosalind. And so today, I'm really gonna try to play to your visual strengths rather than talk, throughout this whole time frame. And I'd like to say that really whenever I find something challenging to talk about or a new problem or something like that, really instead of getting more techie about it and more complex about it, I literally go back and take a look at a curriculum from 5th grade elementary school, or maybe junior high. And I take a look at sort of their math and their science, and I actually find simple answers there to some very complex problems. So we'll be doing that today. We'll be talking about things like time zones and gravity and mass story problems, and those sorts of things, because those still make sense. And I just don't know how much the elementary schools or junior high are still teaching these sort of like basic kinds of ideas about life and how the world works. But if they're not, it's a shame, because we're still using that today. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of this time zone tunnel. And people have heard about going into a tunnel before. And so if we take a look at this as sort of a metaphor for what we're dealing with right now, we had kind of the old normal, which is before we actually came into this tunnel that we're in right now. And the now normal, kind of life right now, can be a little scary. It can be a little dark sometimes. And trying to find our way through this tunnel can sometimes be a challenge. And then as we get to the end of this tunnel, we get to the new normal, kind of the life after. So I'm really sort of saturated with this whole idea about new normal. I must hear that 1,000 times a day. But taking kind of a note from Kevin Johnson, the CEO of Starbucks, when he started Starbucks back up again in kind of their phase 1, he was really talking about a new normal, versus the now normal. And he was setting up his business based on what was happening now, because the now normal will be different tomorrow and the day after that. And eventually we'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I'll be talking about the now normal today and kind of what we're doing in this tunnel, basically. So kind of going back to 5th grade kind of math. And again, I think Rosalind and Bob both talked about this. And this is the whole idea of centering, and being in the now, basically. And I sort of use gravity to explain that. And I mean, basically, gravity is just the attraction between two masses, basically, like the sun and the earth. And that direct line between the earth and the sun, that's where the strongest gravitational pull is. And so as the earth rotates around the earth, kind of that straight line to the sun, the center of the sun, the center of the earth, that's the most powerful line of gravity and pull that there is. Same thing for the moon, kind of that direct center of the moon, that mass, and the direct center of the earth, that straight line between those 2 points, that's the center of the gravity. That's the strongest pull that allows that attraction to happen. So I've sort of kind of hypothesized for a long time that I just wonder if there might be some sort of gravitational pull between our brain and our body, basically. And again, Bob talked about that just a little bit, about centering. And so I'm talking about kind of like time zones, kind of right now, kind of the past and the present and the future. If we take a look at this potential gravitational pull or this powerful attraction between our body and mind, our body can actually only be in one time zone. It can only be in the present time zone. We need a time machine to get it to go back in time or forward. But our brain, as we know, can be in all three. It can think back and actually be in a past time zone. It can think forward and be in a future time zone. But in order for us to be centered and for us to be kind of in this now position, our thoughts have to be right now, because that's the only place our body can be. So in order for us to be aligned with our now body, we have to be thinking about right now. And you can see kind of across the top of the present, there's sort of that blue arc. And over to the left, there's a performance scale from high to low. As we begin to think more into the past, that performance line drops down and gets lower and lower. If we think too far into the future, our performance line drops down farther and farther. So where we're at when we're at our highest performance in terms of our thoughts is when we can align our thoughts with our body and be right here, right now. Kind of that now normal again. But let's talk about now maybe your old normal. And again, these are some of the sheets I'm using with athletes I'm working with right now in terms of where were they before this pandemic happened. We've got high school athletes, we've got college athletes, we've got athletes who are hoping to qualify for the 2020 Olympic Games. We've got athletes who qualified for the 2020 Olympic Games, but now they have to wait. So I'm working with US women's softball right now. That team is already qualified. So that's one thing they don't have to worry about that other potential Olympic athletes do. Other Olympic athletes can have to kind of gear back up again and get ready to go to qualify for the Olympics in 2020. So with the softball team we've got, they're sort of fortunate. They've done that. And so now it's sort of a wait and then get back into training again. Other athletes, this is maybe their last shot to be at the Olympic Games because of financial issues or personal issues or age or something like that. They felt like these Olympic Games in 2019 were their last shot. And then can they actually do this for another 14 months, basically, begins to be the question. I'm also dealing with some injured athletes that was going to affect their ability to be able to compete in these games or for even to qualify. So in some ways, for some athletes, this sort of delay is a bit of a blessing because now they're able to recuperate from those injuries and kind of get ready to go. And then basically on a more domestic side, people were traveling, they're actually having contact with people. They're having friendly conversations with real faces and real people. They're getting their haircuts, had freedom to move. And what I'm asking people to do, the athletes I'm working with, is to make a list of those things that you miss from your old normal. So rather than having these kind of bounce around in your head, and kind of create a fog, I actually have them make a list of the things that they miss right now from that old normal. And if we move back into the now normal again, the present, and again, I think Rosalind talked an awful lot about perspective earlier. As I think about perspective, it can be really two kinds, and basically they're characterized by what you're keeping track of. That healthy perspective is we keep track of what we have, what we've achieved, what we believe we can achieve. And we remind ourselves of these things, all the things that we have, we remind ourselves of those and we're thankful for those. And when you've got a healthy perspective, you're doing that in good times and in bad times. So a healthy perspective, you continue to inventory what you've got and what you can take forward. In the not so healthy perspective, we keep track of things that we might lose, things we think we've lost, things we've actually lost, things we might lose in the future, like being able to go to the Olympic Games. And we regularly wonder why that happened to me. So we begin to kind of think that way, especially when things aren't so good. That's the not so healthy perspective. And so it's clear to understand what you've lost, not just the way things were, but what you've lost. And again, a suggestion, write down what life is like for you right now. What have you lost? What can you still achieve? But what is life like for you right now? You know, is it lonely? I'm doing workouts on my own. I'm not connected. And even though we've got these wonderful, you know, Zoom meetings and podcasts and stuff like that, it still doesn't replace that actual contact with people. And that's what most people are really missing, I think, right now. And thirdly, what will be your new future? What will the new normal be, basically? And folks, and I know you understand this, we really don't know right now, in spite of all the mixed messages we get from the experts. The experts can't even agree what tomorrow is going to look like, much less next month or 6 months or a year from now. But as you think about your now normal, you know, what are the things that are actually in your control that you can do something about? As you think about your now normal, you know, what are some of the things that are out of your control and you really can't do much about? And so those are two sort of opposing ideas there. What can I control? What can I can't control? But let's talk about some strategies to help you think about some things in some ways that you can control, some of the things that are going on in your life right now. Today's media is full of self-help ideas and podcasts and Zoom meetings and other suggestions about how to just get through these challenging times. But I really caution people to sort through that load of ideas very carefully, you know, and hopefully you won't become Zoom overloaded, because I find myself being Zoom overloaded from time to time because there's so much out there to choose from. Exceptional people are exceptional because you're just not satisfied with getting through. So some of these get through ideas are only half the story for most exceptional people like you all out there. Exceptional people see the light at the end of the tunnel, even when it's dark. And you run through all of that noise, which are the distractions, to get through the end of the tunnel, even though you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet. You've all done that in your athletic careers. You've all been in places. We've all been in places where we weren't sure exactly how things were going to turn out. But somehow we were able to keep persisting and moving forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about Stephen Hayes' idea about this acceptance and commitment approach. It's really straightforward. And these are strategies that people can use that will not only get you through these times, but it'll have you ready to go for the new normal, whenever that comes to be. So the first step, and I think Sylvan talked about this a little bit yesterday, that, you know, just maybe we're genetically programmed to be sort of different in terms of avoiding challenges or problems or things or just being uncomfortable. Research and experience tells us that we are creatures of more pleasure, you know, than things that are aversive. Exceptional people learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, that's how you get better. You change your training demands, but if we stay with the same training, with the same demands, the same sweat load, the same workload, we're going to stay the same. And so the only way we can get better is to change and be a little more uncomfortable with some new ideas. But now what we're adding into the formula is now we have to be comfortable with the unknown. We don't know what the new normal is, like I said earlier, you know, what it will look like. We have to be comfortable and become more comfortable with people simply saying, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be in a week or 2 weeks, but not let that stand in the way of you continuing to move forward. I mean, just for an example, and Bob used a lot of baseball examples, but let's say we're in a baseball game and time is running out and we're behind and we're not as sure if there's enough innings or outs left to even catch up. However, exceptional people accept that that's going to happen sometimes. You're going to be in a situation where you feel like you're not winning or you couldn't move. You know, the old S happens. And like Sylvan talked about, it's about you have to accept it and move on. Exceptional people are not frozen by the circumstances. You continue to battle regardless of the score, how much time is left, up to and through the final buzzer. And that applies now, right, also for this pandemic situation we're in right now. Second is clear up your focus. When sport and life are kind of uncertain, which they are right now, our minds really tend to kind of speed up. Maybe we get overwhelmed with what's going on. Maybe it causes to focus too much on maybe the past, you know, or poor perspectives. Things can get a little bit foggy, you know, but we still have to keep moving. When this happens, you have to kind of clean up your windshield by stepping back, slowing down, taking a breath and determining what you know is relevant, to the situations you're dealing with right now, and what is in your control to deal with the problem. Become solution oriented. I've done some work with the Navy SEALs in the past, and one of the things that we were really struggling with was trying to determine sort of how they thought. I mean, with the problems that they'd be exposed to, how could they calm down, and deal with those issues? And I've gone through the Hell Week process a couple of times with some of the classes down in Coronado, and in the Hell Week, is the most amazing experience. You can't imagine how taxing and how just almost unhumanly possible it is. And there was a time, and maybe there still is a time, when a lot of people will ask Navy SEALs to come in, and coaches will call them in, they'll tell their stories and try to change people's life with one story from a Navy SEAL comes in and tells great stories. And it's a great process if you work it right. But one of the SEALs had come in and was talking to one of the teams I was working with, and talked about just how they were able to calm down when things really got chaotic on the battlefield. And my SEAL friend basically said, well, we're not sure. We don't know if it's genetics. We don't know if it's environmental things that we learned when we're growing up. Maybe that 59-week grueling program of training we went through, or maybe it's a combination of all of those things, but we're not really sure which plays into it the most, and it's probably different for different people. Well, the athlete was pretty confused about that answer, because the athlete was saying, well, the way you think could be really helpful to me when I'm competing as an athlete, but if I don't know how to do that, then I'm sort of stuck with just the idea. I need to know how to do that. How can I learn to do that? So after that presentation, my SEAL friend and I, we sat down and talked about it. And I said, we've got to figure out a way to do this. We've got to figure out a way to teach people how to think like this. I mean, how to take all this stimulation and narrow it down basically into a smaller piece that I can really manage. And so I came up actually with a 5th grade math problem. And although we won't talk about that this week, that'll be in my part 2 next week. We'll talk about that 5th grade math problem. I'll have you all do a 5th grade math problem next week. And that really is a very simple way to show people how these exceptional people like Navy SEALs or astronauts or SWAT teams, by the way, think of astronauts, I'm not even sure, did those people blast off today? I have to go back and check the news. But people who were in those kinds of situations can actually make things very simple and slow the game down. What we do know is problems can cause chaos, but we also know that solutions can create calm. And exceptional people embrace chaos and master calm. And that'll be some of the things I'll be talking about next week too, in terms of the part 2. 3 is be present. And I know that Rosalind talked about this earlier. As we get older and just going through life, things will change. They won't be like they used to be. And there's a tendency for all of us when we're under pressure and stress to kind of think about the way things used to be, or how they could be in the future. We're kind of getting out of that present time frame again. Now, it's good to do that, but it's also more important to know when it's time to come back into the present again. Life is about change, but it's really best to kind of stay in the present moment and solve today's issues. This whole idea, and I've got some exercises actually go through with people in terms of multitasking and demonstrating just what a myth multitasking really is, because research and really some of our own experience will really tell us and show us that brain switching is probably one of the most efficient ways we can use that brain energy. And as we take a look at the tasks that we have in hand, it also shows us that all these tasks we're trying to do at the same time, the efficiency of us doing them really, really goes down. One of the things that I use with athletes to help them stay in the present is cues. And again, I think, Bob and maybe Rosalind both talked about cues. So I think we probably all have seen this, but let's take a look at this for the love of the game. And this really demonstrates cues.
Are we supposed to hear anything?
Oh, can you hear the audio or you can't hear the audio? Yeah, you should be hearing audio. You're
No,
not?
we don't.
No, there's a way you can share
Audio.
your audio.
It might be because you have headphones in for just for the video.
Is that better?
Yep.
Great. Sorry about that. I had my headphones in, didn't realize that I was cutting the audio out, but maybe you got the audio at the very end of that. Did you hear the end of it, Anna?
Strike 4? I don't know. It's not even 4 strikes, so I don't know what it said really.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that was a really, really fun video to watch. I mean, it was Kevin Costner throwing, but he had a lot of noise around Yankee Stadium, basically. And we're talking about an audio cue that he had. And when he said, clear the mechanism, that really quieted everything down so you could really focus on just the batter, basically. So I'll take my earplug out and I got some more video to show, so I want to make sure that we got the audio straightened away here real quick. This picture is a picture of one of our swimmers' feet. And this was in the Olympic Games over in London. And so what I found in terms of working with athletes regarding cues, that the audio cue that Kevin Costner used in that movie, they're really hard to kind of call up, basically, when your head's so noisy with all the other things going on in your environment. So I have found that visual cues work a lot better. So with the athletes that I work on or work with, they'll have things written on their feet. They'll have things written on the back of their hand, maybe a baseball bat or their wristbands, someplace in their visual field, you know, that they're going to see. So basically this athlete was having some real difficulties when we were at the Olympic Games, and we were like 2 days out, you know, from, you know, the performance of this athlete. And so we talked about what the issues were that were kind of swelling up, you know, in her life at that point in time. And so we came up with some cues that she could put on her foot, because that was the last thing that she was going to look at as her start foot when she started to swim. And those cues really didn't necessarily move her into a more powerful way of thinking, but it definitely shut down all the negative things that were interfering with her performing at that point in time. And they worked really well for her. In fact, about 2 months later, the athlete contacted me and said that she actually had those things tattooed on her foot and she uses them today, you know, even. So cues are really, really good ways to be able to help your athletes get into the mental now and become centered, like Bob was talking about earlier with those baseball and basketball players. The fourth step in Hayes's process here is connect with others. And physical sort of social distancing is really unfamiliar to us. We're just used to having that contact. We're creatures of contact, basically. Sport teams they're built for that kind of contact. I mean, we've got huddles, we've got high fives, we've got handshakes, we've got fist bumps, we've got all kinds of that contact that's really made for sport. And I know what the athletes I'm working with, they miss that kind of contact with people. You know, they're looking forward to having that again, basically, because again, we're just creatures of that contact. This virtual contact that we're having today it's a temporary placement, you know, I hope, you know, but it does keep us connected. But we just lose that third dimension, I think, of contact. What the U.S. women's softball team is doing during this time frame is each week they've created their own TED Talk. So each player creates a TED Talk, and they can choose any topic they want. It could be about them or something that interests them, and then they all get together on the same Zoom, you know, platform, and then a player does a 15-minute TED Talk. And so that's how they stay connected, kind of using this modality we have right now. And it's been really, really helpful for them. The fifth
picture of you.
Did somebody say something? Okay, the fifth step is to revisit your values. You know, what's important to you? What do you value? Family, friends, health, connections, faith, whatever that might be. And again, make a list. I'm a list kind of guy. You know, I've done some work with some pilots and other people, like they make lists, you know, and doctors, they make lists, and more people are making lists. I'm kind of a list guy. And the list could be just literally a list of all the things, or in some cases, people might be more visual. They'll actually put pictures that might be something that reminds them of a value or something that's important to them, but have that in a place where you can see it, maybe the refrigerator door or your mirror or something like that. And these are the same visual kind of reminders of your values as those cues were, you know, that we talked with Kevin Costner a few minutes ago, or that swimmer's foot. You know, a cue to kind of bring you back to this time in this place and what's important to you basically as well. The sixth is basically a commitment to action. And I'm not sure how many people actually know who Admiral McCraven is, but he was a 36-year veteran in the Navy SEALs, went to school at the University of Texas, and he gave the commencement address at the University of Texas. And he outlined 10 things that he believed got him through the Basic Underwater Demolition School in Coronado. And if you've got time, I would suggest you take time and just Google Admiral McCraven and UT commencement for 2014, and listen to those 10 ideas that he had that really kind of helps you know, you get through tough times. And the very first one was, he said, make your bed. Make your bed every day. He said, do something very simple. Start your day out with having gotten something done. And making your bed is pretty doable for most of us, I think. And so he said he couldn't understand why, when he was going through this SEAL training, that every day they'd have to make their beds, and they made it perfectly. I mean, they had square corners, and, you know, the other SEALs would come in, the cadre, they'd measure, and everything had to be, you know, 12 inches from here and 6 inches from there, and they would tear it up, and they'd have to do it all over again. And they thought that they were just being messed with, you know. Well, they probably were, you know, but the point of that was, he said that, you know, we're always striving to be perfect, and they were trying to make a perfect bed, but no matter how perfect you made it, somebody would tear it up. And it was about paying attention to detail. Just pay attention to small little details. And we've heard that from 100 different people, you know, in our life. The details make such a difference. So do something every day that's very goal decorated. Make your bed, everybody, first thing in the morning, and take a look at Admiral Craven's commencement exercise. It's really pretty cool. Actively find solutions in today's issues. Act upon those things you control. Jumping down, stay connected with others and help them, you know, by staying connected. Or so you can ask them for help if you need to. And again, we're into our last 2 days of Mental Wellness Month. And so this is another one of the reasons I think that, you know, Christina wanted to kind of bring this to the attention of everybody, to kind of help, you know, remind people about this being the National Mental Health Day. I hope when June 1st rolls around, I think on Sunday, that all of a sudden we don't lose our emphasis, you know, on mental health and how important that is. I mean, in life and in sport. One of the old adages about the Olympic Games was, you know, the Olympic Games is not, you know, every year or every 365 days or every 4 years. It's every day for most athletes. And then again, these are things that exceptional people do, you know, but sometimes exceptional people have to be reminded of them. And there's a great song by Andrew Day, it's called Rise Up, that really gets at this whole idea about facing challenges and kind of moving forward. And so, you know, there's something you can control right now, basically, and that's constructively use your own time. You know, I'm going to encourage people to do at least 2 things. You know, one is to creatively stay sport fit and continue to hone your sport skills. And I know that's going to have to be really creative on the part of some athletes, because again, I was just talking to a baseball pitcher yesterday. And this person is actually throwing up against a cement wall because he doesn't have anybody to catch him at that point in time. So he's been creative, you know, just paint a little strikeout square on the cement wall, and that's what he throws at, you know, every day, just to stay in throwing shape. So if we need other people to be involved in our activities, I mean, we just have to be creative to find ways to be able to do that. And then secondly, learn something new. I mean, learn a new language, a new musical instrument, do some artwork, be creative, do something different, you know? And so when we're finished with this and you look back on this, you can basically say, well, you know, I did do this. I can speak conversational Spanish or something like that, or I can play a few chords on the guitar, you know, that you actually accomplished something, you know, when you've finished this pandemic piece here. Finally, you know, be exceptional, you know, and help others be exceptional. And in this case, this is Joe Harris. He plays for the Brooklyn Nets, and he has a basketball camp every year, and it's free. And the basketball camp that he does, I mean, they turn people away, but this last year they had over 300 kids show up for this, and it's free. And he pays for the whole thing. But the little people are always watching. The little people are always watching the exceptional people, because they're the role models. And especially during these times that are challenging right now, when it's challenging to be exceptional, just remember the little people are watching, you know, and we model that really every day. So I've got one more little film clip here. And again, with all the things going on in our country right now, we've got a number of our cities that are in protest right now over, you know, some of the tragedies that are occurring in our country here right now. But I mean, hopefully it's a time when we can begin to remember that everybody is important, and that we have to kind of remind people of that. Can you do that?
Off in the distance, the game's dragging on. There's strikes on the batter, some runners are on. Then suddenly, everyone's looking at me. My mind has been wondering, what could it be? They point to the sky, and I look up above, and a baseball falls into my glove. I play right field. It's important to know. You gotta know how to catch. You gotta know how to throw. That's why I play in right field, way up where the dandelions grow.
As a proud sponsor of Little League Baseball, Pizza Hut welcomes all the kids who make it great.
Making it great.
And so now, you know, I've covered a lot of things very quickly. I wanted to spend, you know, at least half of my time just being able to kind of like talk with people and maybe answer questions about what we've talked about here and how they might work basically in your life. So do we have any questions there? Let's see, I see some chat questions.
Can you put that first slide back up, please?
Okay, the first slide?
Yeah, I didn't get all the way down to the bottom, but I liked your disclaimer.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, let me find it again.
So I have a question.
Absolutely.
There seems to be some resistance in a lot of people when they've gotten themselves, well, they're clearly not doing some of the things you suggested, like learn something new or get involved in things to keep busy and active, and trying to recommend that to these people get a lot of resistance. So I'm not, you know, everyone has their reasons, but is there a way that everyone is hearing, oh, do something, do something, do something. So I think people are shutting down from that and getting a little tired of that message, and yet they're not doing something for themselves. So what's a different way of approaching that so we don't sound like just yet another bombardment, email, web message, everything that we keep hearing, to actually get people, because it's a vicious circle. Once they get active and busy, they'll be happier, and then they'll want to do more, but they're sitting there and they're not and they're really in a woeful state. And I'm not sure if it's serving something. It might be serving them something. Maybe it's just a rest, but just finding it very difficult to pass this kind of information on to people who are not really making use of this, downtime.
Yeah, good question, Anna. I'm a cognitive psychologist, so I really have people do things, to be active. So let's say if this week I'm talking about with an athlete, and we're talking being active this particular week, part of our discussion today will be, what are they going to do? Because I'll be checking on them next week. We'll be talking again next week. So rather than just suggesting things kind of let just disappear, with the people I'm working with, I keep track of that, because that'll be something we'll discuss next week. And I really want them to have done something with that, because they know that we're going to talk about it. And I would say, with just very few exceptions, people, I think, sort of appreciate sort of having that, but then they're also part of discussing what it is they're going to do. And then knowing that they're going to have to kind of bring that back in and talk about it and process it as well. So suggesting, but also being actively involved, in following up with them. So there is some progress made there. And that seems to work pretty well, Anna, I would say.
Okay, great. Thanks.
This is going to be a short session. I'll check some questions over here. There's a question over here about how might I support a player who's struggling with addictions. He said he missed that webinar yesterday. Well, I'd have to refer that probably to, I think it might have been Peter who was talking about that yesterday. And I've done work in addictions, but at this point in my career, I'm not doing any of that work really anymore. So if I've got someone who's really struggling with addictions, which could be alcohol, could be drugs, could be eating disorders, could be gambling, it could be a variety of things. I do have a network of people, with whom I will consult with or refer to, if we've got somebody who actually has an addiction issue. So over the last 30 years, I've worked with clinical issues and in performance issues, both. But at this point, I'm really more focused on performance issues and sort of everyday life circumstance issues, and not so much the addiction pieces. So again, if that's something that presents to me, I will be talking about that person, about a potential referral to someone who is really spending more of their time and has that expertise in working with addictions. Oh, now somebody's got a question here about that film about the Bad News Bears. Now that was truly a Pizza Hut commercial that I loved. Basically, it sent a great message, I thought.
How could you set up physical cues? Like if you're first starting to work with a client, like how would you set that up and I guess start to establish that?
And who is this talking?
This is Josh Fiorito.
Okay, Josh, if we go back to the example of the swimmer's foot, for an example, what happened on that instant was we were actually training in the training pools, and in London, they had like 3 different training pools set up for us that were outside the main competition area. And if you've been around swimming much, or if you even haven't, the coaches all stand in a line at one end of the pool. And then swimmers swim back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And whenever they do a set, they finish right back there at the foot, of the coach again. And the coach will usually have a piece of paper kind of plastered to the front, kind of bulkhead wall, and that'll show, what sets they're doing and whatnot. So people are coming back and forth, and either people are swimming or they're up against that one bulkhead right at the foot of the coaches. But on this particular day, there was a swimmer who was at the other end of the pool, kind of all by herself. She had not returned to the bulkhead end. That's really unusual. So I walked around and squatted down next to her and asked her if, kind of what was going on. Of course, she looked up at me and she was just crying her eyes out. So I sort of waved to the coaches and I said, would you like to come and just talk about this for a little bit? And let's just get out of the pool and get you out of this environment so we can kind of talk. And so we did. And I hadn't worked with this swimmer much before, because when we go to the Olympics, we've got 46 swimmers from all over the US. some of them who you know, some of them you know of, and some of them you've actually worked with before. This one I knew, but had not done much work with before. But we'd been on one Olympic team once before. And so we began talking about the issues in her life that were going on. And there was a family issue that was going on. There was a performance issue that was going on. This athlete had competed in the Olympic Games in Athens, but didn't do as well as what she wanted to. So a lot of those old stories began to kind of come up. Some family issues, and that was a major issue for her. And then the idea of coming back and making Olympics again and maybe not doing very well at this Olympics again after 4 more years of incredible work. She's a very spiritual person, so she was even praying, but that didn't seem to be helping. So she didn't really think that even God was on her side at this point in time. And so we had to figure out something pretty quickly, that would work for her, because I mean, talk therapy is going to take a while to resolve some of these issues. I had to think of something pretty quickly that would make sense to her, that she'd be willing to try, and then and move on from there. So we started that session. We actually came up with a cue at the very end of that session for just one of those issues, and the one issue that she was dealing with was primarily the family issue. And so she's very sad about that. And so we came up with a cue, that we used to practice the next day at training. We had drew it on her foot. It says, okay, when we get to we get to the start blocks and you start pushing off, I want you to look at this cue regularly, to remind you of that we want to be able to interrupt that kind of negative way of thinking and think about something different. So her heart was kind of broken, basically. And so one of the symbols on her foot was a heart that was whole again, but it just had kind of a little line in the middle, to remind her that my heart was broken, but it's healing at this point in time. And then there was a spiritual quote for the spiritual thing. And then, just the performance issue. So she really had 3 symbols for each of those things. So, and she really bought into it because it really made sense, because we trained it for 2 more days to see if that even helped her in training. And it seemed to help her in training quite a bit. That then made her willing to try that in practice, in the competition on the 3rd day as well. So in this business, and for people who are in this business, that you have to think on your feet and come up with stuff, that you think might work in that situation. So that's how it worked with that particular athlete, if that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I would say because it works so well with that athlete, I do cues with the majority of athletes with whom I work with right now. It works so well in that sort of emergency kind of situation that now I begin to kind of put that into the whole system of working with an athlete in terms of cues.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike Gervais, he says, you coached me once on adding humor into working with athletes. Might be fun for you to riff on that too. Hey, Mike, why don't you jump back in and tell me about that, and we can talk about that with everybody.
All right. What's up, Doc? How are you?
How you doing?
Man, it's good to hear you.
Good to hear you too.
Yeah, so it was early in my career, and I don't know, I can't remember the exact case, but I think it was with, what was the sport? I think it was with basketball. And I was making these little cards to give out to basketball players. And the cards had some like inhale, and it was just very serious. And then you just reminded me, like, hey, use humor in there. Like, take the edge off of it sometimes. And so it stuck with me forever. And so you're a beacon for that for me. So I just wanted to kind of honor that and maybe see if you could take a little further for us as well.
Oh, great. Yeah, Mike. If we think about sport, we think about playing basketball, we think about playing football, I guess we play track and field too, I'm not sure, or play tennis. I don't know, do we play tennis, Rosalind? I don't know. We play, sport's about play. It's really interesting that, it used to be that people actually be playing sport, even into college. And I think maybe even some Division III schools probably still do that. People still play when they go there. Maybe not so much Division I anymore. But it's sort of like, at what point in life does play become something different, in an athlete's career, where they're going from playing to working, to competing, to competing to win, and win is what we do. And so I think we really have to kind of always circle back and bring in play, to this. And so even with like today, for an example, with that little Pizza Hut thing at the very end, I like to have some fun and like to have some humor in what we're doing. Again, to kind of keep things light. And again, like Bob was talking about before in terms of centering, one of the things that we can really use to center people again are things like music and things like humor and dance. And I think one of the presentations, I forget, Sylvan, I think Sylvan talked about, dancing and singing. And that guy's got a good voice, by the way. And, dancing and singing and that sort of thing is something that in all countries and all nations and all cultures do. It's part of what they do to solidify and bring people together in a fun, non-serious way.
Thank you for the comment on my voice.
Are you there, Sylvan?
Yes, I'm here. I didn't miss a word of what you said. I'm not taking notes. I appreciate so much listening to you. You're my idol.
Oh, I'm no expert, Sylvan. I disclaimed that already, remember?
Yeah, that's why you're an expert, because you don't claim to be it. It's when we stop thinking that we're an expert, that's where it becomes. We become an expert when we don't think we are. And you are the best in our field. And so is Dr. Niederfer and everybody that I've been listening. It's just a privilege for me to be part of you guys, because I don't see myself in the top people in the field like you guys are.
Isn't it interesting, Sylvan, and everybody else, though? I mean, whether it's me or you or Mike Gervais or Bob or Rosalind or other athletes we have in, or other people get to speak, you're going to hear similar things over and over and over again. I mean, Bob's been around in this business longer than anybody has. And the things that are being said by young people in the business right now are really no different than what Bob's been saying for years. So there are some things that will just pass and stand the test of time, regardless of whether they're talking about, sport or pandemics or something like that, in terms of how we get people moving and how we keep them moving and how we raise to new levels. It just doesn't change over the years. How we package it changes. But I've read maybe 100 sports psychology books, but after 2 or 3, I don't get anything new. I've got to go to different sources like special forces books or business or corporation books or something like that to kind of steal from different parts of the literature that makes sense in terms of what we're doing here, in the sport world. But you'll hear repetition from all of us in different ways today and next week as well.
I love that, Jim. It's Mike again. And I just want to ditto that I feel like I use your stuff every day. And so being able to learn from you was one of the great assets in my life. And so, I'm not sure that much is new, but what is new is the way that it flows out today. And so your authenticity and your note on hitting the authenticity is really important. So again, I just want to say thank you. I'm going to fade out and say I really appreciate this.
I agree with you, Michael, so much. And I think that everything you are teaching us, we can use it in every aspect of our life. Life is a sport. And I think it applies to every part of our life. So I agree with you, Mike.
Cool.
Another interesting note from Kathleen. Kathleen says, what an amazing opportunity. I'm just a personal trainer and special ed teacher. Kathleen, you are not just a personal trainer or a special ed teacher. If we think about things like personal training and athletic trainers, we kind of grew out of athletic trainers and what they do with athletes, I think, because athletic trainers spend so much time trying to keep athletes healed and recovered and ready to go. And like an athletic trainer or your barber or someone, that, I don't know, does your nails or your hair, you spend a lot of time in personal conversation with those people. And so we're sort of kind of grown out of, those kinds of conversations and become kind of the pit crew, I guess, so to speak, for the people around athletics. And for the special education people, I did work with developmentally disabled people for probably about 3 years. And I have to say that the kinds of things that you do with that collection of people, I've really never worked with anyone that is more appreciative to what you do for them. So the work you do, for your special education, kids or people and that sort of thing, you'll be a hero, and they'll remember your name and what you've done for them for a long, long time. I sort of break people down into 3 categories. One is a mentor, where there are people that are honest, they're caring, they're knowledgeable, they're guideposts, and they are actually a role model, which means they do what they're asking you to do and teaching you to do. And we've all got those people. Another class of people, what I call tormentors, and they're the opposite of that, So we'll have mentors who are coaches. We'll have tormentors who are coaches. We'll have parents who are mentors. We'll have parents who are tormentors and teachers. We find the same job classifications or roles in kind of both those categories of mentors and tormentors. Then we also have people kind of in the middle. They're like the neutral people, I call them, and if you're a coach, let's say for an example, or you're a sports psychologist or a trainer or a teacher or whatever your job might be, be a mentor, because if you're neutral or if you're a tormentor, you're probably in the wrong business, because you want to be able to mentor people, with what you're doing as well. The people I remember, I've got coaches who I remember that were totally mentors for me, from high school to college to Coach Wooden, later on. I think Peter talked about Coach Wooden yesterday as well. He's mentored so many of us in so many different ways. It's incredible, either through his books or in person. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work with him in person for a while. But we also have some tormentors. I've had some coaches who were tormentors in my life, that, you grew up kind of thinking, I don't want to be like that. I won't do it that way. But then I've also had some people in significant roles that were neutral, and I didn't remember their names, anymore. So for everybody who's sort of on this podcast, if you're working with people, really challenge yourself to be a mentor and to do all the things that you're asking them to do. Let's see if I can find another question here. Or if somebody else has one, just go ahead and jump in, because we've got about maybe 5 minutes. Here's an interesting question from Sandra from Switzerland. And Sandra says, from working with the Swiss Olympic Academy and deal with younger athletes who are now for a while without any competition, how do you keep their competition or competitive spirit up? Sandra, that is like the $1 million question, right now. I'm doing some work with a young swim club in California, and we're doing sort of like Zoom meetings, like this. Fortunately down there, they're beginning to move into a phase of this pandemic where they can actually begin to swim, with limited numbers of people, and that sort of thing. And so I've seen some really funny pictures of swimmers being in blow-up swimming pools in their backyard, just being funny, again. So with kids, you have to be funny, you have to have fun, you have to come up with games. And maybe some of these games that you come up with, these interactive games, even if they're just games on TV or on video like this, if you can just keep their spirit alive just by having these contacts with them until you can get them actively involved with each other again. Because again, sport is such an easy way to build spirit and keep spirit going if you do it right. And without that, it makes it more challenging. And that's why it's so important that we get sport going again. What I'm telling athletes basically is that when athletes begin to compete again, then the rest of the world will take a look at athletes competing again. And when we're actually out there competing again, they will begin to feel that maybe it's safe for them to be out there as well. Maybe to go to competition games. So athletics and activity around the world is sort of the glue that kind of holds us together. And so for young athletes and middle-aged and old athletes, I'm just saying, You know, it's about staying fit. It's about being creative, about honing whatever skills you've got right now, because you might be some of the people who actually go back to work first. That really helps the rest of your city, your state, your country, you know, globally, kind of move us forward in a more healthy way.
I just want to add that a good resource for all those games and fun things to bring the kids and the young ones together, even the old ones, is gymnastics. There's like a plethora of activities that are organized that work also on motor skills as well as engagement. So it's a good sport to pull from.
Yeah, and I thanks for jumping in, Ann. And I think that I know we've got a lot of very, you know, sort of capable, creative people maybe listening. And if anyone else has an idea right now to maybe jump in and respond to Sandra's question, I mean, I would sure welcome you to do that.
My name's Danica, and like you just gave the example of working with a swim club, I too work with several swim clubs, and it's very consistent, especially meeting these kids or these athletes where they are and trying to engage them through TikTok videos. You know, that's the rage with these kids right now. And a lot of the coaches and I have worked together to create competitions within that, right? Whether it's putting on all their gear and making a silly video and having everybody vote, right? So
Yeah.
different things like that, and helping them stay motivated, helping them stay creative, and also keeping that kind of competitive spirit lit.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I think another emphasis of mine, I mean, throughout the year, even before this even happened, but now as well, and that is working with coaches to keep them going, you know, because again, one of the swim clubs I was working with, the coach was reaching out to me simply saying, I've run out of ideas. I don't have any more ideas, you know, and so we can be very, very helpful to coaches, you know, in terms of creating more ideas, you know, for whatever issue that they might be dealing with. I mean, along that same line right now, I work with a Major League Baseball team, and I'm having lots of phone contact with all the people who have been furloughed, you know, so Major League Baseball is going through an incredible transformation, you know, right now. And most of minor league baseball has just stopped. And so that's created a whole new group of people that we're dealing with right now in terms of coaches and managers and athletic trainers and strength conditioning coaches, you know, who are not only dealing with not being able to do their job, but now they don't have a job. So that's another area that's sort of spinning off from this environment that maybe the general public doesn't see, you know, either. And let's see, Dr. Gilbert had an interesting, he said, what's your favorite video to share with athletes? I've got a whole list of videos. I am always looking for video clips, you know, to show athletes. And I actually end up showing more videos and video clips to coaches and administrative staff, you know, and that sort of thing. And most of those have got humor, you know, kind of like the Pizza Hut one, because that group of people is even more serious than the athletes are, because their jobs are predicated upon success. So I've got like the Legend of Beggar Vance. I got clips out of the Legend of Beggar Vance. Gosh, now I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, with the Legend of Beggar Vance, I've got lots of clips out of that one that I show athletes. And even though it's a golf, you know, kind of movie with Will Smith and Matt Damon, there's a lot of sports psychology sort of like tips and clips that you can use across any sport. And Don, hello. It's good to see you again. I saw you yesterday. And then somebody sent in a note that simply says, competition is good. As a lacrosse coach, we have had our team compete with some of the teams on our spring schedule. For example, we have the athletes in a 24-hour time log, as many miles as they can running to compete against our opponents. So maybe this is coming from a maybe a college or university. So it sounds like they've created a way within the athletic department to have maybe the lacrosse team, I don't know, compete against volleyball or baseball or something like that. So not only are you're doing two good things here. I mean, this is a great idea. You're getting some movement within your own team. One of the things that's really helpful, especially in a college athletic department, is to get some competition and support and camaraderie between teams within that athletic department. Because sometimes they get in their own silos and don't have much to do with the other ones. So that's a great idea. Are we about out of time here? I mean, I can sure stay on here for a while and answer questions because I know we got somebody else coming up. I think Nick's coming up at noon, I think, isn't he, Anna?
Yeah, and I think there's one more question there for you from, oh, okay.
There's a question regarding how can I help as a counselor to swimmers after returning back to trainings? Can you give suggestions to sports psychologists after the pandemic, please? Well, I think with a lot of the athletes I'm working with as well, even though we're trying to get training in and maintain, you know, some health and fitness and that sort of thing, that we can almost take a look at this as an athlete returning to play maybe after an injury. And so maybe I can talk more about that, let's say next week, because my part 2 will just touch upon some of the things we've talked about here today, but I'll have quite a few different things to deal with, and maybe I can kind of move that question and include that maybe in a slide next week in terms of dealing with people coming back and handling it a little bit more like a return to play following an injury or something like that. Maybe that'd be a good way to couch that. Okay, I think we're about out of time here, Anna. Is that about right? Or whoever is helping manage this.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Well, people, thank you so much for all your time today, and hope to see you next Saturday as well.
Heck yeah.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Great
so
to see
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello, MJ.